And I'm here with the folks from Insomniac Games, Chad and Shaun. Thanks for joining us today. The Unspoken, I got to play it. It's really cool. We have it demoing here on at OC3 on the show floor. What is the cool thing about the Unspoken that you guys want people to know?
Well, the main thing to know about the Unspoken is that it's all about the fantasy of casting spells with your bare hands. I mean, who hasn't wanted to make a shield or a fireball, right? Basically,
you're a wizard, which is great. Awesome. So talk about the Unspoken and what the idea is behind it. It's PvP, and talk about some of the different magical spells. There seems to be quite a few different ways you can take down your opponent.
I mean, we have a number of different ways that you can cast spells. You have, primal spells that are relatively simple that happen in each hand. We have gesture spells where you're doing big things, and then one of the coolest ones we have artifact spells. So there are all these. There's hidden potential in all of these everyday objects, and so part of that is figuring out like how to activate them and then when to unleash them in battle. But we feel like with those 3 layers, it gives you enough stuff to work with to get some really interesting matches going in combination.
It's always changing, and there's always something to learn and to do. Right. So it gives it some good diversity. For you guys at Insomniac Games, by the way, huge fan. Spyro is my jam. Chad, what is your role? What part did you play in building this game?
So I'm the creative director of the Unspoken, and I'm also the studio director of Insomniac's North Carolina studio.
Okay, and what role did you play? What was the work like?
The work, well,
or coming up with the idea.
Yeah, it's funny. For the longest time, we've talked about making a game that had an urban magic theme. Like, we're obsessed with the idea of taking a real-world location and then imagining this underworld that not everyone can see that's lurking just below the surface. So it wasn't until we saw the touch controllers, and this was over a year ago, that we thought that is what we need to use to realize this world that we've wanted to make. We immediately thought of all the spells that we could cast when we got these things in our hands and started brainstorming, and everything just spiraled out of that moment.
I think the ideas are really cool. Everything seems unique, and I've never seen where you actually forge a spear right off the bat. We're definitely going to talk a lot more about that because we're going to have some gameplay. We're going to talk over it and give more insight into the game. Now talk about touch, because that seems to play a huge role. Maybe you guys can touch on how it was developing with touch.
I mean, touch is, in a word, it's amazing. It's transformative.
Intuitive.
Yeah, it's like the kind of thing that, so, when you've tried VR for the first time, like, it's amazing. The immersion, all these things that you can do are totally incredible. And the thing that really blew me away about touch is when you do that, it added this whole other layer. It took the experience to a whole nother level. Hand presence, all of those things are amazing. And then, and it also maps so perfectly to what we wanted to do with casting spells, with magic. I mean, we like Chad said, we've had this idea for a long time, but controllers and joysticks weren't the right fit, and so when we saw this, it was instant. Like, this is the thing we have to do.
And VR was always the way you wanted to develop this idea, or was that something that gradually became the right fit for you?
I mean, that kind of came out of the process when VR became viable, and when we saw it and started to think how cool it would be to be in a magician's duel, where you have to really look around and understand your surroundings, where things can happen around you, and where you can get this kind of back and forth with another player, where things unfold, and you feel like it's, somebody's casting a spell, but you're countering it, and kind of learning all of the nuances of casting spells to go back and forth like that.
Yeah. Now, Shaun, what did you work on, and what was your role in making the Unspoken?
On the Unspoken, I am the game director. So it's some programming, some design, and then I'm also the production director in the North Carolina studio.
All right. Did you run into? Oh, sorry. Continue.
Well, so a lot of it is finding out how the technology works, and then figuring out how it's going to match our creative goals. It's all like in that intersection area, which is a blast. Like, it's really, really fun. We're working with a new concept, new IP, and it's a totally new technology. So
totally new platform and everything. Yeah. And you guys worked with Insomniac, and were you guys on Ratchet & Clank or any of those games?
Yeah, we've done a couple of Ratchet.
So what was the transition like? Did you guys run into any hurdles? or challenges along the way?
Well, I mean, it was fairly smooth in a lot of
few.
ways. Like, there's a lot to figure out with VR the first time. It definitely changes everything with movement schemes. We had to do a lot of prototyping to figure out how our teleport was going to work, and of course, we had our share of missteps along the way, things that seemed like a good idea that just did not play out. I remember at one point we had a projectile that you could shoot and then teleport directly to that spot, but it just didn't feel comfortable. It was almost like too much fiddly weirdness for the game that we wanted to make. So it's a ton of trial and error, and a lot of the things that we know that we almost take for granted from our Ratchet and Clank development cycles, we've had to rethink pretty dramatically for what works in VR with the touch controllers.
And how to develop for it, of course, is all new. The teleportation, by the way, works great. Now it's just two buttons, and you direct yourself where you want to go, and you end up on that pillars. Anyways, you guys will get a look at it for sure. Talk about the multiplayer aspect, because PvP, you're against another player. Talk a bit about how that came to be. Did you always want it to be just one player? Did you always want it to be multiplayer driven?
That was all about seeing the power of social VR with the Toy Box demo. Like so many people, it was the first time we saw touch, and that's the thing that we came to see. But then there was this other person there that you're interacting with and playing these games, and we're like, this is such a good fit for what we want to do doing these spellcasting duels. And so I think it's just, on the multiplayer, it does have a lot of the things that we know. We've made multiplayer games before, so, a lot of the mechanics and the concepts translate really well. But I think the big thing is the fact that you're with this other person. Like one thing that we say is you're not just trying to kill the other player, like we're trying to create an experience for the other player. So
you're playing with him.
Yeah, you're really trying, so some of the spells that you see, we're thinking about what is it like to be attacked by this giant golem, or, like these fireworks coming down.
Or the orbs, the floating orbs.
Yeah, exactly. So in that way, it's been different and a fun
learning experience for us. What is your favorite part about developing for VR?
Well,
challenge.
That's part of it. It's something new. We've had to, it's fun to be in that place where you don't know what the conventions are. Mm-hmm. When we make, say, a Ratchet and Clank game at this point, we kind of know how you're going to run and how you're going to jump and how you're going to fire a weapon.
The basics are there.
The basics are there. But this still feels like there's room to experiment. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of these things haven't been established, so it's a lot more prototyping, but it's really fun, and I think that's the reason a lot of us are in it, because we really enjoy that kind of just blue sky work where we're really kind of figuring things out as we go.
Of course. And when does it come out? When can everybody start playing it?
So it's out on December 6th, and it is day in with the touch controllers. It's a launch title. That's right, yes.
Awesome. I'm excited to see some gameplay. Any final thoughts that you want to add about the Unspoken for folks out there who are just tuning in?
Just the main thing to know is that it's about PvP magicians duels, and we're trying to make a game with incredible depth where you can really get good at it. Okay. You can practice in the game in single player. You can, kind of hone your spellcraft by yourself.
Super helpful.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's what we want.
Yeah.
You can square off against that AI, get really good at casting, but when you get in there with another human, there's a lot to learn, and you can just keep getting better and better, more and more competitive as you play, and you kind of ascend the ranks and become an archmage.
Maybe kind of game.
We think of it as this competitive game we're making, and who knows where it goes from there.
Yeah.
But it's all about trying to make something that you can really practice and get great at.
Well, it's a great idea, and now we're going to throw over to some actual gameplay that is happening here at OC3.
Awesome.
So someone is in the world right now. We can see them playing in the green screen at the bottom corner of your screen, and what is happening in the world around them.
So it looks like both of these players are playing as the Kineticist class. We're showing two different classes here at OC3. The Kineticist is all about using telekinesis, like picking up objects. And you can see she can pick up a shield object with her left hand, and she can pick up any object in the environment with her right hand and use it as a very deadly projectile. The other opponent in this case is also a kineticist, so these guys are about brute force. Like, it pays to really methodically find large objects and drop them on your opponent. You can reach out and grab gargoyles and air conditioning units. Oh, now she's using a gesture spell. This is a volley gesture where she's pulling like police cruisers from the environment and dropping them directly
for
on
the
her
first
opponent.
time when we were actually showing a bit of gameplay, so that you could really pull in, it seems like, any parts. And are you just building? Are you guys going to add add more objects to this later down the road?
Oh, yeah, we're always adding more. I mean, it's extensively physics-driven. And now I can see that her opponent has cast a Kinetic Shield, so she's going to be much harder to hit now. At the same time, her opponent just bought his or herself some time, so they can cast a spell while they're protected. It's a lot about casting and countering. So once you figure out what counters what, you can really get good at a match and put yourself in a position to cast whatever spell you want.
I love it.
Or you can drop a car on somebody.
That seems like an easy way to kill someone.
There's always that.
Yeah. Can we talk about the other class too a little bit on those powers? Because I think that's the one I got to try out at the demo.
Right, you probably tried the Anarchist, which is about destructive city magic.
Really love the Anarchist.
So that one can like whip up a fireball. It's got a mystic shield.
That only is timed, right? It'll disappear after a certain amount of time.
That's right. You can't just keep it up. It does decay over time. And that class can also make a giant skull, like a fiery skull in its hand, and then push it toward the opponent. And
that's
at home,
intimidating.
so yeah, it really keeps your opponent busy because it takes a while to track. That class can also make a volley of fireworks. That's kind of like anti-teleport, so your opponent can't just go anywhere. They've got to really look up in the sky. Again, a unique to VR thing, and understand where their best exit is. Oh, and she just won with that devastating Kinetic drop. Yeah.
That was great. Good job. Now, what about moving about the space? So I'm seeing that she's cutting between different pillars, different spots in the different parts of the buildings and stuff.
Right. There are cover points. There are places that are good to be in strategically.
So you can use the environment for cover.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can. So much about this arena, especially, is about like getting higher ground, denying your opponent on higher ground, finding those cover points so you can cast some of the more elaborate spells.
And she's cast a couple of different artifacts at this point.
Right.
Like I saw her summon a Clockwork Imp. So that little like mechanical, almost stop motion looking creature is out in the environment stealing her opponent's embers. And those are like the magic that lets you make your gesture spells. So it's a really nice advantage to use that artifact early on in the match. And she also, now she's making Cthulhu's Grasp. So if she can draw this glyph correctly, and again, it's something you can practice and get good at, she's going to summon demonic tentacles on all of her opponent's pillars.
Whoa.
And
there
make life really difficult for her opponent. Yeah.
And see, now you can see the tentacles in the background, and now those are denied. And so her opponent has the decision to make: am I going to stick where I am, or am I going to try to like destroy some of the tentacles to get out there?
And her opponent has artifact spells in the arsenal that can counter that really well. Like there's a dispelling sensor that you can use that's kind of like an anti-magic grenade that'll get rid of those tentacles when they're cast out in the world. And the other thing to know is that you can target your opponent's embers. They're almost like explosive. So you can take away power from your opponent as you go. And that kind of strategic, like dominating the space, is a big part of the way the pros play the game.
So she just did something really cool. There is a summon, a unique summon in every level, and there's this sort of like balanced battle to grab it. And so she actually got the summon and was about to.
Wow, so she had a strategy behind that, or maybe it was just.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's another decision to make.
Yeah.
Am I going to focus on like putting the summon together, because it takes a good amount of time. That's what the game is about. It's about all these decisions you can make, and all of these spells, all of these counters.
And making the right decisions at the right time.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I was having trouble with the artifacts, but I'm going to go back in there and figure it out. But
cool.
It seemed like a lot of fun, and I had a great time, even though I didn't win. Thanks for joining us here today. You guys were so great. Huge fan of Insomniac.
Thank you.